That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him.
Behind Van Halen's explosive riffs, wild stage antics, and headline-making feuds, one man
again and again and again. For Eddie to say he had to show him what to play and had to teach him all those songs, that is the biggest lineup.
And held it all together, quietly, powerfully, and with more sacrifice than fans ever knew.
Bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I was in that band for 11 years. There was never a video camera involved of Eddie showing him what to play.
But his journey wasn't just about bass lines and backing vocals. It was about loyalty tested, credits lost, and a betrayal discovered not with a phone call, but on the internet. In this untold chapter of rock history, you'll learn how Michael Anthony's story unfolds, revealing much more than what the public ever saw. Michael Anthony's early musical foundation was deeply shaped by his family, particularly his father, Walter Sobolewski, who played the trumpet. Walter's musical background left a strong impression on young Michael, who would often hear his father practicing and performing. This exposure to live, real-world music at home laid the foundation for Michael's growing curiosity about instruments and performance. As a child, Anthony followed in his father's footsteps by learning to play the trumpet. He developed a genuine interest in music during his school years, participating in various music programs. After his family relocated to Southern California in the mid-1960s, he attended Dana Junior High School in Arcadia, where he joined the school's marching band. His participation in the band allowed him to further develop his musical talents in a structured setting, while also introducing him to the experience of group performance and discipline. Even though he was initially focused on the trumpet, Michael gradually turned to rock music around the age of 13. He shifted his focus to the bass guitar because he wanted to be different from his friends, most of whom played guitar or drums. A friend, Mike Hershey, lent him a Fender Mustang guitar, which Anthony modified into a bass by removing 2 strings from it. This marked a crucial period in his musical evolution, when he made a full commitment to learning the bass. After noticing how talented and dedicated his son was, Anthony's father bought him a vintage Fender Precision bass along with a Gibson amplifier, enabling significant growth in the tools available for Michael as a musician. Early on, Michael was influenced by great bassists such as Jack Bruce of Cream, John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, and Harvey Brooks of Electric Flag. Despite being a naturally left-handed person, he learned to play the bass with his right hand, demonstrating his flexibility and adaptability as a musician. These early influences, along with his consistent practice, gave him a strong technical foundation and a keen musical ear, qualities that would prove essential during the Van Halen era. As Michael's skills sharpened, fate tuned its strings for a collaboration that would change rock history. During the early 1970s, Michael Anthony immersed himself in the Southern California music scene, performing with several local bands before settling into one that became especially important, Snake. The group was a power trio that blended hard rock with blues influences, and Anthony played bass while also taking on lead vocal duties. Snake mostly performed cover songs from popular rock acts, but also experimented with original material, giving Anthony a platform to hone his performance skills in front of live audiences. The band frequently played school dances, local festivals, and clubs, gaining a modest following in the Pasadena and Arcadia areas. It was during this period that Anthony's musical ambitions began to take shape, setting the stage for his eventual entry into Van Halen. To crystallize, Michael Anthony grew increasingly determined to pursue music as a career. The local music circuit in the San Gabriel Valley proved to be a vital networking hub, and it wasn't long before Snake crossed paths with another up-and-coming band known as Mammoth, which featured brothers Alex and Eddie Van Halen. The 2 bands sometimes played the same venues, and on one occasion, Snake opened for Mammoth at Pasadena High School. That night, Mammoth's public address system malfunctioned, and Anthony offered to let them use Snake's equipment so the show could continue. This generous and professional gesture left a strong impression on the Van Halen brothers, and it planted the seed for what would later become a life-changing collaboration. Around that time, Mammoth was at a crossroads as well, with major changes happening internally. Their bassist, Mark Stone, had just departed from the group, leaving an empty slot in the band. Eddie and Alex Van Halen remembered Anthony from earlier shows and decided to invite him to a jam session to see if there was musical chemistry. The session, which reportedly took place in a garage, ended with what the brothers had hoped. At this point, Anthony proved that his energetic bass style and powerful backing vocals were exactly what they had sought as a band. His ability to lock into the rhythm and bring vocal harmony added a new dimension to the group's sound. Wasting no time, the Van Halen brothers quickly inducted him into band as their new bassist after being very impressed with the synergy. Shortly after this, another major shift took place in the group when they changed their name from Mammoth to Van Halen. The new name was necessitated by the fact that another band was already operating under the Mammoth moniker. That new name was reportedly suggested to emphasize the identity of the two brothers while ushering in a new phase in the development of the band. With David Lee Roth on vocals, Eddie on guitar, Alex on drums, and Michael on bass, the classic lineup was officially in place. This marked the beginning of what would become one of the most iconic rock bands of the late 20th century. For Anthony, joining Van Halen was more than just a band change. It was a launching pad into an international career that would change his life. With the classic Van Halen lineup solidified in the mid-1970s, Michael Anthony quickly proved himself to be a vital part of the band's musical identity. As the band began performing across the Los Angeles club circuit, particularly at iconic venues like Gazzarri's and the Whiskey A Go Go, Anthony's onstage energy and vocal harmonies stood out. His high-pitched backing vocals became a trademark of the Van Halen sound, providing a contrast to David Lee Roth's lead vocals and helping to define the band's vocal style in a crowded rock landscape. On top of that, Anthony's tight, no-frills bass playing anchored Eddie Van Halen's explosive guitar work and Alex's thunderous drumming, allowing the band to perform with precision while maintaining its raw edge. When Van Halen released their debut album in 1978 under Warner Brothers Records, Anthony's musical contributions were on full display. His bass lines provided a steady rhythmic foundation on tracks like Runnin' with the Devil and Ain't Talkin' About Love, while his background vocals elevated anthems like Jamie's Cryin' and Feel Your Love Tonight. The album was a commercial breakthrough, and Anthony's harmonies were widely praised for their blend of power and melody. As the band rapidly rose to fame, touring heavily in support of their albums, Anthony maintained a consistent presence both musically and personally, earning a reputation for being dependable and low maintenance compared to the often volatile dynamics among other members. Initially, Anthony was treated as a full-fledged member financially, receiving his fair share of profits and expenses. This included everything from album sales and tours to merchandise. According to ex-manager Noel Monk, Anthony was equally responsible for 20% of the band's debts and revenues and participated in band business decisions during its early years. But as Van Halen picked up in popularity and internal struggles for power developed, the financial arrangements started to tilt toward the Van Halen brothers and Roth, thus altering Anthony's share of income and ownership rights. But through it all, Anthony's loyalty lay with the music and the progress of the group. Anthony participated in and contributed to the development of Van Halen during the late 1970s, solidifying his place as an essential member of the band's legacy. Into the early 1980s, during a series of multi-platinum successes, Michael Anthony continued to tour and record with the band. His playing stayed steady and professional amidst mounting tensions between the others in the group. By Fair Warning and Diver Down, Anthony had become a well-established foundation player in the rhythm section, and his contributions, especially vocal support, continue to be instrumental in shaping the band's live performances and recordings. While Eddie was dazzling audiences with his guitar prowess, and Roth was often the one turning heads, slowly but surely both fans and critics began to recognize Anthony as an extremely important pillar on which rested the musical cohesion of one of rock's most explosive acts. The 1984 contract controversy. By 1984, Van Halen had become one of the most commercially successful and influential rock bands in the world. The release of their album 1984 marked a career high point, featuring massive hits like Jump Panama and Hot for Teacher. However, behind the scenes, tensions within the band were escalating. Michael Anthony, despite being a founding member and significant contributor to the band's signature vocal sound, was increasingly sidelined in key decisions. According to former Van Halen manager Noel Monk, it was during the 1984 tour that a major shift occurred in Anthony's financial and legal relationship with the band. Monk revealed in his memoir Runnin' with the Devil that Anthony was pressured by the other three members, Eddie and Alex Van Halen and David Lee Roth, into signing away all future songwriting credits and royalties. The circumstances surrounding this decision were controversial. Monk claimed that Anthony was presented with the agreement backstage just hours before a concert, and all three of his bandmates stood over him while he signed the documents. The contract was retroactive, meaning Anthony also forfeited credit and revenue from the 1984 album itself, despite contributing musically and vocally. This moment represented a pivotal power shift within the band, as Anthony transitioned from being an equal partner to a contracted performer with no stake in the group's intellectual property. While Monk insisted he would have advised against signing had he known in time, Anthony went through with it, reportedly to avoid confrontation or jeopardizing the tour. The devastating results, as far as finances were concerned, lasted a long time. By signing away his rights to the band, millions in potential earnings were lost by Anthony from future licensing agreements, greatest hits albums, and reissues that included songs he helped produce. Most particularly, 1984 went on to sell over 10 million copies in the U.S. alone, and became one of the most lucrative records for the band. For decades thereafter, Anthony would see no share of songwriting credits, which detracted from his royalties and, more importantly, his legacy as a rightful contributor. For the next few years, he remained in the band on tour as well as in the studio, but a reduced stature found him increasingly vulnerable while facing future disputes and changes in the lineup. That arrangement was unjust. However, Anthony said nothing for years. He held himself with professionalism and refrained from publicly criticizing his bandmates. Eventually, Anthony spoke about the incident during interviews and fan Q&As, confirming that he signed away his rights under duress. He lamented how the whole affair unfolded, but stressed that saving the band, the one thing he wanted most, was what drove him through it. To play music was all he desired. The 1984 contract fight became a poster child for the internal power struggles of Van Halen and ranks among the starkest examples in the music industry of how creative and financial control can be wrested from principal players. Eddie's criticism. In the years following Van Halen's commercial peak, Michael Anthony began to experience a noticeable shift in how his contributions to the band were publicly recognized, particularly by Eddie Van Halen. Although Anthony had been a fixture in the band's sound since its inception, Eddie began diminishing his role in interviews, making comments that implied Anthony lacked the musical skill expected of a professional bassist. One of the most controversial claims came from Eddie's 2015 interview with Billboard, in which he said he had to show Anthony how to play every note and accused him of lacking initiative. The comment sparked immediate backlash from fans and fellow musicians, many of whom felt the statements were both unfair and historically inaccurate. Eddie's public remarks stood in stark contrast to the respect Anthony had earned over decades of live performance, particularly for his ability to provide tight, on-point bass lines while delivering signature high harmony vocals. In response to Eddie's claims, Anthony later stated in interviews that such criticisms were completely unfounded. He maintained that he had always learned the band's material on his own, and that there had never been any sessions where Eddie had to teach him what to play. Anthony emphasized that if such moments had occurred, they would have been documented, but no such evidence exists, reinforcing his assertion that Eddie's claims were exaggerated or fabricated. It was not only Eddie's criticism that hurt Anthony, it changed him personally. Anthony mentioned in retrospective interviews that the comments were hurtful, especially coming from someone he had known for decades and once considered a close collaborator. He termed the experience emotionally draining, especially because of his loyalty to the band and, therefore, his efforts to keep harmony during tumultuous times. Publicly speaking, those statements also cast a shadow on Anthony's professional image for a short period, such that new fans would question his abilities, despite his long experience of credible performances and compliments by fellow musicians. Anthony did not stir a public quarrel, but he admitted that the widening gap between him and Eddie contributed to the falling apart of their bond. By the mid-2000s, their communication had all but ceased, and Anthony was quietly pushed out of the band's core operations. After Eddie's death in 2020, Anthony expressed regret that it was never mended. He revealed that despite the tensions in the media and the harsh word exchange, he had hoped for a chance to reconnect and find closure. Unfortunately, there was no such chance. The divide between the two serves as a poignant example of how even legendary creative partnerships can be complicated by ego, miscommunication, and unresolved conflict. But the tension didn't just stay in the spotlight. Behind the scenes, a quiet erasure was already underway. The decline of Anthony's role. By the late 1990s, Michael Anthony's presence in Van Halen had begun to fade in subtle but meaningful ways. During the recording of a 1998 album, Van Halen 3, Anthony played bass on only 3 of 11 tracks. Eddie Van Halen performed bass duties on the remaining songs, signaling a shift in the band's internal dynamic. While Anthony still appeared in promotional material and toured with the band following the album's release, his diminished participation in the studio raised questions among fans and insiders about his standing within the group. This marked a turning point, as Anthony's one central role was being gradually reduced, both creatively and operationally. As Van Halen entered the 2000s, Anthony's visibility within the band continued to decline. Despite being involved in early reunion talks and participating in a few interviews and rehearsals, his actual input on recordings remained limited. When the band released the 2004 compilation album, The Best of Both Worlds, Anthony did not perform on the 3 new tracks featured on the record. His only contribution was backing vocals. These exclusions added to the perception that his role had been largely marginalized, especially as Van Halen's sound and lineup began to shift without him. As the Van Halen brothers took tighter control of the group's musical and business direction, this marked Anthony's last tour with the band, the highly publicized reunion with Sammy Hagar in 2004. However, even this reunion came with some tension attached. Anthony had to agree to an offer of reduced financial compensation, plus a contract treating him like a hired musician rather than a full band member, before being allowed to join the tour, according to Hagar. The tour was extremely successful, but failed to heal any emotional scars. Anthony later said that he wanted to move on and be professional about it, but the signs kept mounting that the band no longer considered him an important part of any future. On the other hand, all things were being covertly engineered to replace Anthony, something he wouldn't fully realize until much later. In 2006, Eddie Van Halen decided to appoint his teenage son Wolfgang Van Halen as his direct replacement for Michael Anthony. The news didn't come as a clear notification to Anthony, but was perceived by him through what he read online or through rumors and speculation among fans. Years later, in interviews, Anthony revealed that he felt blindsided and hurt by the way it unfolded. He said it was even worse that, after decades of loyalty and contribution to the band's legacy, there was not even a phone call to say that such a move had been made. He was emotionally sandbagged by losing his position in the band he'd built from the ground up. This shift, coupled with a deteriorated relationship with Eddie and Alex Van Halen, signified an official end to his time with the band. Not so much a decision, but an erasure. Sammy Hagar collaborations. Following his departure from Van Halen, Michael Anthony reconnected with longtime friend and former Van Halen frontman Sammy Hagar. Their musical chemistry, forged during the band's Van Hagar era, laid the foundation for multiple successful collaborations. One of their first major projects together after Van Halen was The Other Half, a touring act launched in 2005. The group, which featured Anthony and Hagar performing Van Halen hits from both the Roth and Hagar eras, was enthusiastically received by fans who felt the spirit of the original band lived on through their performances. The name The Other Half was a cheeky nod to their role as the often overlooked halves of Van Halen, and their live shows were a celebration of the music that defined a generation. In 2002, Anthony and Hagar had also joined forces in a short-lived but ambitious supergroup called Planet Us. This lineup included guitar virtuoso Joe Satriani, drummer Dean Castronovo, and at one point, Journey guitarist Neil Schon. The band recorded a few tracks, including Psycho Vertigo and Peephole, which were later released on Hagar's 2008 solo album Cosmic Universal Fashion. Although the group never released a full album or completed a tour, it showcased Anthony's continued ability to work alongside some of rock's most accomplished musicians. The collaboration was a testament to his versatility and standing in the music world, even outside of the Van Halen brand. Surprisingly, the most successful of Anthony's ventures besides Van Halen is Chickenfoot, which he formed in 2008. Once again teamed up with Hagar, The band also included the blazing talented guitarist Joe Satriani and Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. In 2009, the band released its eponymous debut, which boomed in both great reviews and sales, debuting inside the top 10 of the Billboard 200. The chemistry and musicianship of the entire band have been widely praised, and Anthony's bass playing and vocal harmonies remain an integral part of their sound. Their sophomore effort, Chickenfoot 3, 2011, only underlined the fact that they were more than a side project, proving once again that Anthony had plenty of creative fuel left in his tank. In 2014, Anthony teamed up with Hagar once more, this time in a new band named Sammy Hagar and the Circle. The band also featured Vic Johnson on guitars and Jason Bonham, son of legendary Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham, on drums. The Circle featured a lot of Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, Montrose, and Hagar solo tracks, making for quite a lively yet nostalgic live experience for the fans. The band also released original music, including Space Between, an album that hit number 4 on the Billboard 200 in 2019, which is a testament to their continuing relevance. With such projects, Michael Anthony has shown that his love for music has not waned and that his rock legacy goes much deeper than his time with Van Halen. Canceled reunion tour. Following Eddie Van Halen's death in 2020, there was renewed interest among fans and, reportedly among some members of the Van Halen camp, about a potential reunion tour. However, the possibility of a reunion, particularly involving Michael Anthony, was quickly quashed, signaling that any hopes of resolving past conflicts or bringing the original lineup back together had evaporated. Within the band's inner circle, in organizing a tribute tour to honor the guitarist's legacy, talks of a reunion gained traction in 2021 and 2022, with drummer Alex Van Halen reportedly reaching out to former members and collaborators, including Michael Anthony and David Lee Roth, to gauge interest. Joe Satriani was also brought into the conversation as a potential stand-in guitarist. According to Satriani, serious discussions were underway to bring together a lineup that would celebrate the band's history, with Anthony's involvement considered crucial to maintaining authenticity. However, despite early momentum, the plans for the tribute or reunion tour unraveled due to internal disagreements. One of the key points of contention reportedly involved David Lee Roth, who allegedly resisted certain aspects of the tribute format. According to Alex Van Halen and others close to the situation, Roth refused to participate in any concert that would overtly honor Eddie's memory, at least not in the way the rest of the group envisioned. This reluctance created significant tension and stalled progress. The emotional weight of such a tribute, combined with unresolved issues among band members, made coordination difficult, and hopes for a cohesive event began to fade. Matters were further complicated by the ailing health of Alex Van Halen. In 2022, he reportedly suffered a back injury that made it even less likely that he would participate in a physically demanding tour. This left the reunion with Roth backing away and Alex out, with two of its most crucial pylons missing. Michael Anthony later confirmed that he had indeed been contacted and had shown interest in being part of the project, but the logistical and emotional barriers became far too enormous to conquer. Although a willingness from some parties was there, at the end of the day, the reunion was marked as impossible and no official tribute tour took place. Michael Anthony was denied an opportunity for a final closure in reunion with both Eddie and the entire band. Although he had repaired some rifts with Wolfgang Van Halen, the larger unresolved grievances with David Lee Roth and Alex Van Halen remained. The cancellation of the tour really exemplified how badly torn this family really was. Fans had held out hope for so long that they would see Anthony once again on stage with Van Halen's other surviving members, but were ultimately disappointed by the deferred plans that marked the end of any realistic possibility for a full-circle moment. The dream of a proper Van Halen farewell, with all key figures united, quietly faded away with the silence that followed. Valerie Bertinelli's biopic opposition. Valerie Bertinelli, actress and ex-wife of Eddie Van Halen, has publicly stated her strong opposition to any biopic about the legendary guitarist or the band Van Halen, at least during her lifetime. In a 2023 interview, Bertinelli revealed that she had explicitly told her son, Wolfgang Van Halen, to make sure I'm dead before allowing such a film to happen. Her reasoning stemmed from a desire to protect the integrity of Eddie's memory and avoid any dramatized version of his complex life. She expressed concern that Hollywood might distort key aspects of his personality, musical journey, and struggles with addiction, which she felt should not be sensationalized for entertainment. Bertinelli's resistance to a biopic is rooted in deeply personal experiences. As someone who was married to Eddie from 1981 to 2007 and shared a son with him, she witnessed his highs and lows firsthand. She has often spoken candidly about their difficult moments, particularly Eddie's battle with substance abuse, and the toll it took on their relationship and family. For Valerie, the idea of watching those moments fictionalized on screen, even with artistic intent, would be emotionally overwhelming. While she did mention, perhaps jokingly, that Selena Gomez could play her a movie, she quickly added that she hoped the singer would decline if ever asked. There's a really important part about the families being protective now under the umbrella of Wolfgang Van Halen's career. A personal image as a musician carrying the weight of his father and paving the way all his own. On several occasions, he addressed the pressure of being the son of Eddie Van Halen and how people, fans, and the media around him demanded comparisons. He has also spoken out against people who shamelessly use his father's name or legacy to gain their own fame. Wolfgang, in interviews, has maintained that honoring Eddie through music, as opposed to dramatized movies or public spectacles, is what matters most. This also confirms his mother's stance, and the family stands together in cultivating low-profile dignity for Eddie Van Halen. On the other hand, what really swings her that way is more than suspicion of the industry's further instinct to preserving things emotionally. Because of groundbreaking fame, intense personal conflicts, and even personal tragedies, only a very short while ago, the Van Halens would be raw about Eddie's experience. Valerie has said that the family is still reeling from the effects of his passing in 2020, and a biopic risks reopening wounds that barely have begun to scab over. It is this position that reminds the real people, the grieving families, the history is accentuated enough to encompass in 2 hours of film. But while Valerie protects the past, Wolfgang is quietly shaping what the future might look like. Legacy and modern perspectives. Wolfgang Van Halen. Wolfgang Van Halen, the son of Eddie Van Halen, has become one of the most vocal figures in shaping the public understanding of his father's legacy in the modern era. Through interviews and social media, Wolfgang has criticized what he sees as toxic fan culture, particularly fans who weaponize nostalgia or demand return to the classic Van Halen lineup. He has expressed frustration with those who ignore the emotional realities of the band's history, especially following his father's death in 2020. Rather than romanticizing a reunion or tribute project, Wolfgang has consistently advocated for honoring his father's memory through authenticity and respect, not fan service. Beyond public commentary, Wolfgang has confirmed that there's a vast archive of unreleased Van Halen recordings, sparking speculation about potential posthumous releases. Guitarist Steve Lukather, a close friend of Eddie's and member of Toto, revealed in 2023 that he and Alex Van Halen had been exploring Eddie's vault of recordings. Lukather suggested there may be enough material for future projects, but emphasized that any decisions will be made carefully and with the family's blessing. There is growing interest among fans for a revival project involving Eddie's unreleased work. However, Wolfgang explicitly stated that anything of that nature would require delicate handling. As he previously addressed, there are no plans at the moment for a new Van Halen album or tour, and the band can't exist without my dad. Wolfgang stated there could be a way of honoring Eddie, but he seemed clear about not wanting to commercialize his father's legacy. Rather, his stewardship has been cautious and focused on the preservation of Eddie's integrity. Rumors about a tribute or revival have not completely gone away. Joe Satriani has mentioned early discussions involving former band members and collaborators, yet nothing concrete has come to light. For now, Wolfgang is concentrating on his own path musically with Mammoth WVH, where he writes, records, and performs everything himself. Although the Van Halen name's future is uncertain, it is clear Wolfgang will make sure any endeavor, either archival or celebratory, is undertaken on the terms of musical greatness and emotional frankness. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold stories from rock history. And hey, don't go anywhere. Click the next video on your screen to keep the music going.